What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. This is episode number 41. I am your co-host, Jason, and I'm joined, as always, as usual, with William Wong over here.
Wow, full name?
Full
okay.
name.
You're wearing the same glasses last time now, right?
I know.
Okay.
You see, I planned it. Thank God you noticed. Thank God you noticed.
Before, when I hit the record button, I was like, wait a minute, look at Jason's glasses, make sure he's not wearing something different, because he's going to pull that same bullshit again, and I'm thankful that this time you just kept it consistent, so.
No, this is a different glasses than last time when we recorded.
Was it?
Yes.
But this, okay, so you had the bamboo ones, you have this pair.
And then I have the black ones, the ones that I wore last time.
Last time.
Yeah. So, basically, season 1... the stupid preamble was weather. I don't know what season 2 and season 3 would be, but now I guess season 4, the stupid preamble is me with glasses.
Hey, mate, you never know. Maybe next episode I wear glasses. I do wear glasses.
Yeah. Never see you wear them, though.
I only wear them when I drive. So, and do I drive? No, so I never wear them.
But we have a bunch of stuff to talk about. As usual, we will go into a bunch of news stories. Will and I have been reading and watching a bunch of stuff for our main discussion topic.
And also, like, future episodes as well. So it's a bit difficult to add more stuff into the rotation when it comes to, adding stuff for the reading watching lists. We do like watching other anime. We're not just doing it for the sake of the podcast, but time is tough.
Yeah, and I'm reading, like, random stuff here and there. So it's not like I'm completely abandoning my child mangas.
I told you I was going to be reading Akanebashi, right? And I still haven't gotten around to reading it yet. So, yeah. But, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to try and at least get enough done for future episodes. That way I have enough free time to just read some manga, because I do miss it. I do miss reading manga.
But did you miss all these new anime adaptation announcements?
So in the last week, a bunch of adaptation announcements as well as sequel announcements have come out. We're not going to go over every single one of them because, spoiler alert, half of them are isekais, and the other half of them, you kind of already expected them to be renewed anyway. But we did keep a few announcements in this news section because, one, we really like these animes, and two, they're also, some of them have just come back out of nowhere, and so we felt it was worthy talking about them anyway.
So our first news story is regarding Tower of God, which is probably one of the most famous webtoons, up there, basically, with like Solo Leveling, God of High School, and so on and so forth. There was the first season that premiered as, I think, the first of the Webtoon Crunchyroll original partnership. And it is, I think, ranked on my anime list the highest of all of those Webtoon adaptations, right? And was it Noblesse or Noblesse, God of High School, and Tower of God. And they now announced a second season. So that's kind of good because we watched Tower of God season 1. I didn't finish it, but it wasn't because it wasn't good. We just kind of moved on to other things. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think we essentially watched it for the purpose of doing that Crunchyroll episode.
Do you remember which number?
No, I never remember this shit, man.
Episode 4, I think.
Wow, was it that long ago?
Yes, it was.
So it was after the Big 3 episode then?
Yes.
Okay, now I remember because it's easy to remember that one.
Right, but the Big 3 is number 2.
Okay. What was number 3 then?
Number 3 was adaptation process.
Okay, fair.
I'm not even looking.
You just know.
I just know.
You're savant of sorts, right?
It's like eclectic memory.
Beautiful mind kind of thing.
That kind of thing, yeah. So Tower of God, I think, is, of all the Webtoon shows, the easiest, most obvious choice to have a season renewal.
Again, I have to, simp again, but it's hard to beat an anime when you have Kevin Penkin do the music for it, So it was produced by Telecom Animation Films, which I don't really know much about, but I would say the animation quality for the first season was rock solid.
It was definitely rock solid, yeah.
Score-wise, it's like mid to high 7s. Out of all the Webtoon adaptations, which includes God of High School and Noblesse, Tower of God is probably the best one. So it's no surprise that out of the 3, Tower of God is the one that got a second season. So I kind of look forward to it, but that also requires me to finish off first season, which shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, it shouldn't be hard. So I like Tower of God for those, I think, half of the cur. I think we watched like 5-6 episodes. It was really entertaining, really good. So Looking forward to see when that would be announced in terms of a confirmed release date.
Yeah, so no confirmation for release dates. They didn't even confirm on Crunchyroll which studio is going to be doing it. But hey, for all you Tower of God fans, Webtoon fans, or any fans that just want to watch some good anime, look forward to further announcements on Tower of God Season 2.
All right, the second news story is in regarding a very well-known, like dungeon crawling manga that has been really highly ranked, and it's called Dungeon Meshi, or known as Delicious in Dungeon in English.
Yep. So, Jason brought this up to me before because I've always kind of enjoyed like food-based, not really food-based, but like series that talk about food. And so therefore it's like in the end I ended up checking out Food Wars, really liked it. I also watched Silver Spoon, which isn't really about food, but it's a process of getting food. So I feel that if I ever got round to reading Dungeon Meshi, I would really enjoy it. Well, I guess I could wait a bit longer because Dungeon Meshi is getting adapted by, I had no idea why the studio picked it up, Studio Trigger.
Yeah, of all things. So apparently, Studio Trigger produced a 30-second animated commercial to promote the manga's 8th volume in September in 2019. So I guess there's pedigree there.
Yeah.
But
it made sense in the end that they would be the ones who would go on to doing it, but I didn't even know that they did a commercial for it.
Like, Delicious in Dungeon is one of those mangas that I would not think it was up Studio Trigger's alley. But at the same time, like, it's a very well-known manga. A lot of people like it. You should read it, or just wait for the anime adaptation.
Yeah, as it's licensed by Yen Press, and in their sort of short description of the story, what do you get when you cross dungeon adventures in food manga? You get Delicious in Dungeon, where we find our troupe of adventurers on a mission to save their lost team member while figuring out how to survive on the food that the dungeon provides. If that's enough to lure you in, hey, just wait a couple months, wait for the adaptation to come out. If it's Trigger, I am 99% sure it's going to look awesome. So I'm looking forward to it.
I do think they're gonna play it straight though, like not like bombastic, kind of crazy, like Edge Runner, Kill la Kill type vibe.
Do you feel that this is one of those where like you might not see as many of the signature Trigger kind of moves? I mean, like they might have one or two, but because it's not like an original and it's not like a very kind of Trigger-esque kind of property.
Yeah, it's not very actiony, so it's like let's cook some good food. So there you go.
On to the next adaptation. Now, this one has come out of nowhere, but if you kind of keep track of its timeline release, then you would figure, it kind of makes sense that this one's getting a third season adaptation. We're talking about One Punch Man. So One Punch Man, One Punch Man aired its first season in 2015. At that time, was done by Madhouse. Then in 2019, the second season, after a long wait, was produced by JC Staff. And as much as the story is pretty good, as much as the character interactions are really good, overall, because JC Staff's not really known to be doing really good action animation.
Well, like Railgun, I think is very good action. It's basically they didn't spend a lot of money and time on it. Basically, is my opinion.
Yeah, so it got derided by a lot of people. I think it's just people just really enjoyed like that whole like super OP-ness of season 1, and therefore it wasn't as focused on season 2. But 4 years again. So 4 years between season 1 and season 2, and then now between season 2 and season 3, which I estimate is when season 3 will come out. One Punch Man season 3 will come out. But at this time, there has been no confirmation of release date, no confirmation of the studio. There is confirmation that the character designer that did season 1 and season 2 will be on set for season 3.
And I think that's
the only consistency right now.
I think that's a smart move because the blowback from season 2 was palpable, I think. And it wasn't just like, hey, us, like, quote-unquote hardcore or dedicated weebs that knows the ins and outs. It was literally everyone who loved season 1, which is pretty much everyone, in my opinion. Then they get to season 2, and they're just like, what the fuck is this? And I get it, but I still think, as Will, you said, like, the story of, like, I guess the quote-unquote villain of season 2 actually has a very interesting kind of thought process and perspective. And I think, hearing from what people say, when it kind of resolves itself to the end, it's like a pretty good journey.
And generally, it's still pretty well received, right? Like the second season is like a mid sevens, high sevens, which if you compare it to like other like seven anime, like it's actually still a good score. It's just that when you're coming up against season one, which was like incredibly hype, it's only down from there. Like unfortunately, because of the studio change, because of the aesthetic change, it was always hard for season two to like amount to anything that season one produced. But hey, look, I'm hopeful that season three will be good.
And for those who are wondering, hey, does that mean that Madhouse has a chance of picking it up? Technically, yes, there is a possibility, but you have to understand the behind the scenes, which is for season one, the director, of whom the name escapes me at the moment, he had to kind of like assemble his own team because of the dire straits that the studio was facing at the time, or like just how uncooperative that process was. So literally, other than the director, everyone else was kind of like a freelancer type thing. So when the project was done, season one was done, they literally all went their separate ways. I mean, no hard feelings or anything, because season one is fucking fantastic, but like, yeah, you're not going to get those same people, at least at Madhouse. And apparently they interviewed the director, and he's like, yeah, I made like a lot of phone calls. I called in a lot of favors. So unlikely.
So let's see how it goes. It really just depends on which studio picks it up and also when it gets released. I suspect it'll be 2023. It might be later than that, depending on how long it takes for a studio to actually start adapting stuff. But of course, there's also like other things that are getting adapted too. So we're going to move on to the last adaptation we want to talk about, and quite probably the most contentious one of the bunch that we're featuring today. So
here, Will, I have good news, bad news. So let me give you the good news first, okay?
Yeah, give it to me straight, Doc.
Haikyuu is getting a 2-part sequel anime movie.
Ooh, fucking great. I really like Haikyuu.
Okay. So we're good, right? Like, that's just good news, right? Good news all around, right?
What's the bad shit? Why are you leading me on with this?
So the way that would you call it season 4? Because season 4 part 1 and 2, but it's called To the Top.
It's season 4.
Season 4.
Or the 4th season, more specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
It ended at a point that it was very obvious where in the manga it was at, because surprise, surprise, the manga series is done, completed. So you could technically read it on Viz Media and just like enjoy the ride. But the stopping point of season 4 has like about another 100 chapters.
Yeah. So it's not so much that it's getting adapted that's the contentious part. It's the fact that it's titled as Haikyuu Final, meaning that the sequel movies are going to be the be-all, end-all of the Haikyuu anime series.
But there could be final season part 1 and final season part 2. Well, they already said it's going to be a 2-part sequel movie. So I don't think they will say, oh, the second final season, right? They won't do that, right?
I suspect it'll be like two-hour anime movies. So 4 hours total.
4 hours.
4 hours for roughly 110 chapters. I have no idea. But like I think, look, it's definitely a bit obscure as to like why they decided to just rush into doing 2 anime movies just to round up the whole Haikyuu series. I feel it's more a business decision, though, simply because of the fact that the Haikyuu series, in terms of the manga, is done. So there really is no need to continue to further adapt more stuff. They might as well just get everything wrapped up and get it done, and then Production IG can go off and do other stuff. That's not to say that like that's the reason why. I mean, we've seen with Demon Slayer, it's ended like a year and a half, almost 2 years already, but it's still getting adaptations in full as well. So it's not just anime movies; it's also full-on curves of anime seasons.
Right, and because it's a movie, you'll have to technically watch it in theaters before they release it on streaming platforms or on a Blu-ray and so on and so forth. And that's always harder to access compared to just going onto Netflix or Crunchyroll or High Dive or whatever and watching the show every week. So I guess it is a business decision, and at least we're getting more Haikyuu, but I'm a bit hesitant at receiving this news. A mixed feeling, if you will, yeah.
I still think it will be good. I think, of course, like the main concern is like how are they going to condense that much manga into 2 movies?
Do you think they actually won't?
I think it would draw the ire of the fans if they did just skip out a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they cut some stuff out. It would make sense because all you have to do is just nitpick a couple things and then just make it so that it's a little bit more streamlined. We've seen series do that before. I mean, it's to cut stuff, to cut content from the manga when doing adaptations is not a new thing at all. But the issue here is that it's not sort of like to cut stuff in order to get a season out. This is like to cut stuff out in order to have a good ending, and that's where like the main issue is. If you want to send off Haikyuu with a bang, it's risky business when you're starting to cut stuff out that made Haikyuu such a powerhouse in sports manga and anime.
Yeah, and everyone adores Haikyuu. And to be honest, if they did not call it the final, even if it was the final thing that they produce, I would be okay with it because that at least implies that, okay, maybe they had to do a sequel movie and then come back with season 5.
But now that you say Haikyuu final, like that's it. You have now like stamped it, approved it. This is it. And if you don't stick the landing, it's going to be bad. But I still think it's going to be pretty high grossing. I still think it's going to be well received. It's just going to be one of those. It might be one of those. Well, it could have been more. It could have been better. It could have been better adapted, better received. But I think in the end, the good news is still the fact that we will be getting more Haikyuu to watch, as expected.
All right. Will, this next news story is yours, but do you want me to start?
Yeah, bring it in.
Well, a very well-known anime that is going to premiere in October is called Chainsaw Man. Have you heard of it?
Hell yeah, of course.
Right. It is the Tatsuki Fujimoto's manga. Now, the studio that is adapting it is MAPPA. MAPPA is really well-known and really good and really competent. But the CEO of MAPPA all of a sudden just out of nowhere was like, made kind of, was it an interview or just kind of a statement?
Yeah. So at Crunchyroll, the Crunchyroll Expo, one of the interviewers, which was IGN Friends, specifically was speaking with Manabu Otsuka, who is the CEO of MAPPA. And he's gone on record to say that someday in the future, they want to adapt every single manga, every single work that Fujimoto has done into movies. But for now, they're going to be focusing everything onto Chainsaw Man because why the hell not? So that's the key word though, movies. Now it makes sense in terms of the one shots with Look Back Eri and was it Look Back? No, there's Look Back and Goodbye Eri.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there was also the other one too. Just listen to the song.
Yeah, but that one's like 20 pages. So
yeah, so it won't be an adaptation of a movie. It might just be maybe like a short, like a literal one episode OVA. I think it could be done. It might be done if he's gonna stick to his word, right? Otsuka's gonna stick to his word. Then he probably will adapt that too. But as Look Back and Goodbye Eri can be adapted as movies, I don't know if a movie is right for Fire Punch. It makes sense to do it because it's not that long. It's only 8 chapters, 8 volumes.
8 volumes, yep.
But I mean, so was Chainsaw Man, and that was also like, I think it was like 9 or 10 volumes. It came up to chapter 97 before it ended the first part.
Yeah, and you really like Fire Punch, and I read, I think the first 2 volumes.
It's a tough read.
It's
really
really good though.
Basically, anytime you go into like the sort of like censored stuff, the stuff that gets flagged up as not safe for work or 18 plus, or just, hey, what the fuck are you doing with your web searches? You better clear this shit before the FBI knocks your door down. That's what Fire Punch is. And whilst I'm very, very happy to hear that there could be a possible adaptation of Fire Punch, I'm also very wary that because a lot of stuff in it is incredibly, incredibly risque and not safe for work, that it would be a very watered-down adaptation.
I'm just going to say it now. The fact that they said movies and just means that Fire Punch is not happening, in my opinion, because Fire Punch was ages ago. Technically, I think everyone would see it more as a TV anime rather than a TV movie. And at the same time, as you said, the content is really controversial and very in your face and very gory and violent. But whereas Goodbye Eri and Look Back, we know, have won tons of awards, gotten a ton of attention, and they are the perfect format for either, like we said, like a 3-episode OVA or a movie, literally. So I think that is basically him saying we're doing the one-shots if we can.
Well, let's take his statement in full, right? He's interested in making movies, but at the same time, of all works from Fujimoto. So I do still think that if there is space for it, that they will adapt Fire Punch. And making it a movie would make sense, because I think a movie would be easier to be able to get like a more mature rating as opposed to a TV anime. That's how I feel. Because just the fact, unless of course they go exclusively Blu-ray or only like airing Fire Punch on like the more adult-oriented streaming services. So there is a possibility for it. We have seen some real gory, messed up shit getting licensed by Netflix. I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, like watching. No, I wouldn't want to see it on Disney Plus. That would not actually fit their platform.
That would not fly. Whatever you're thinking.
But you would definitely think that like maybe Amazon Prime can pick it up, right? Like there are avenues for Fire Punch to be adapted in full, but at the same time, because he said the word movies, that's where it's like, they might just decide to condense everything and then just release it as a 2-hour thing. Who knows? I don't know. And at the same time as well, I don't know how well it would do.
Right. As a side note, he also said, we hope to adapt Chainsaw Man, the second part at some point as well, which, duh.
I mean, no shit, right? Like, it's one of the biggest properties, if not the biggest property. I think right now the Chainsaw Man hype is higher than Spy X Family.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of which, do you pronounce the X in Spy X Family?
Yeah, Spy X Family, yeah. I say it's Spy X Family.
It's like Hunter x Hunter, but you don't pronounce the X. But nobody's corrected us in terms of Spy X Family.
I think it's just like the way the masses decided to pronounce it, right? Like, I say Hunter x Hunter, but people say Hunter x Hunter. For me, it's the X is important. So,
fair enough. Okay, on to the last bit of news that we're going to go into. Now, this is a bit of a downer. We've been talking about adaptations. We've been talking about announcements to have future adaptations. But when it comes to the future of anime studios, it's not looking very good right now. So there was a report that came out from the research firm Teikoku Databank that was published on talking about the anime industry back in 2021. Now, the report stated that around 40%, specifically 39.8% of 309 anime production studios had incurred losses in 2021, which is 0.9% higher than 2020 and the highest ever in the Databank's records. So, of course, the fact, there's a thing called COVID, it did have a massive impact on every industry, not just anime companies. But it also meant that there was like a shortage on human resources. There was a lot of delays to productions. And that's kind of why it pushed that number to a record high.
For me, the number that stood out was the total industry revenue for 2021 amounted to 249.582 billion yen. So around $1.87 billion. So that sounds like a huge number, but this is 5% lower than 2020, and it marks the first time ever since 2000 that the anime industry for 2 consecutive years has had a decrease. So it kept going up, and then literally 2021 and 2020 was like, nah, son, let's go the other way.
Yeah, so just to sort of give you a little background information on it too. 2020, the Databank recorded there was a 1.8% contraction in total revenue for the industry. So 1.8% in 2020, 5% in 2021. Actually, no, 5% lower than 2020.
Yeah, so it's even worse.
Yeah, so it's not looking great. I mean, in terms of like, if we talk about like how much money the anime companies make, on average, the revenue was around 818 million yen, or around 6.1 million US dollars, which is a lot lower than 2020. And it's also the second time it has decreased from the previous year since 2017. So it's not looking great. It's actually kind of worrying how these anime studios are going to survive. I mean, of course, there's going to be enough people that would be like, well, we'll just put more funding into these companies.
Yeah, or they consolidate or something. Like, there are kind of alternative solutions to sort of, what would you call it? Like, make it stable for a certain period of time.
Yeah, but the issue is not just within the anime industry too. Like, I mean, a lot of the studios are based in Japan, though of course a lot of these companies do also have transactions and partnerships with overseas companies. So, there's transactions with Chinese companies, American companies, Korean companies. A lot of countries work with Japan in terms of doing anime productions, but it's not just the anime production side that is going to be affected by this whole global pandemic. The whole of Japan right now is going through a pretty rough time. Specifically, some prefectures, some cities, for example, like Kyoto, is on the brink of bankruptcy. Actually, the BBC announced just a couple days ago that there is a new sort of like program, not really a program, but like an incentive for the young generation to try and boost the economy by drinking more alcohol. Because apparently kids are not drinking as much alcohol as the older generation.
Wait, for real?
Yeah. I mean, do you drink much? I don't drink much at all.
Yeah, I don't drink much.
And it's the same for a lot of Japanese youth. I mean, by youth, I mean like people who are surveyed between the ages of 20 to 39 because the legal drinking age is 20 in Japan.
Yeah.
So therefore, of course, it's like they're not going to be asking anyone that's 18, 19 because no, you cannot drink when you're at that age in Japan. But that was one of the smart ideas that Japan had to be able to boost the economy. So it's dire straits for Japan.
And same with a lot of countries all around the world. It's not like Japan is the only one that is getting the fallout from essentially COVID.
Yeah, but nonetheless, it's still not good news, right? We of course hope that with the amount of people who are staying at home and watching anime and watching anything else, that it would at least boost revenues for streaming companies. It would at least give more incentive for anime production studios to continue pumping more content. But I think with the fact that we've seen some streaming studios losing the amount of subscriptions, it's not like a clear-cut solution that you produce more anime, more people will come and watch stuff because people have been leaving a lot of these subscription platforms.
Yeah, and just because we keep saying and reporting in some cases that anime is bigger than ever, more popular than ever, this is hard statistics, hard numbers saying that, yeah, but it's actually losing, not size, but like contracting essentially, right? So the industry as a whole has gotten smaller, and we've heard time and time again of animators getting underpaid, mangakas getting health hiatus, and all these kind of issues. And I think it's all just coming to a head.
Yeah, I think like the hope, of course, is that going forward, as countries around the world are getting more acclimated to living with COVID, Japan is also one of those countries where it's like similar to Hong Kong and Japan and China in terms of like having like really, really rigorous COVID controls. Japan is also one of those countries where it's just trying their best to be able to keep everything under control, but at the same time, at the detriment of the economy. Hopefully things open up. They have opened up the country to, external visitors, overseas visitors, but it hasn't come back with the same sort of numbers as they were pre-pandemic, and that makes sense. But I think the faster that Japan can adapt to living with COVID and being able to at least revitalize a lot of the businesses, a lot of the companies they have, who knows? Maybe the future will be a little more bright as opposed to bleak. But right now, it's tough. It's very, very tough. And of course, anybody who loves watching anime, who loves reading manga, should be worried, because what happens if all of a sudden one day your favorite studio just says, you know what, we can't handle this COVID pandemic anymore. We have to lay off a lot of staff, and we have to reduce the amount of projects we take on. Or worst
that
case,
has happened already.
And worst case, maybe we just completely shut down.
Yeah, that would suck for any studio. So
yeah, the hope, of course, is that these companies will rebound and at least be able to be a little bit more in like the flat line as opposed to in the red. But it's going to take time. I think that like actual financial recovery for a lot of industries post COVID will take at least 2-3 years, because spoiler alert, the whole world is kind of going to shit right now. So fingers crossed things get better.
All right, I think that is the end of our news segment. Will, how you feeling?
Pretty good. I think we can just go into a little preamble in terms of what we're discussing for today's episode, which we actually didn't really sort of preview in the beginning of this recording. So today we're going to be doing a studio analysis. We're going to be bringing this back and talking about, I would say, one of our favorite studios.
Definitely, yeah.
Right. We're going to be going over Wit Studio. Very, very renowned for some of the biggest properties that you've watched. We're going to be discussing a lot of those, and some of those where like you already know, like it's one of the best properties from Wit Studio. We'll briefly mention. We don't really need to go that deep into it, but outside of like the usual suspects, there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of Wit Studio.
Yeah, and we watched stuff that we haven't really mentioned before, or at least not in a big capacity. So we will be focusing this episode on talking about those shows while also at least mentioning some of the shows that Will and I keep spamming to all of you guys because we love some of these shows to death.
Yeah. So just a little bit of background information on Wit Studio. While it sounds like they've been around the block for a long time, they've actually only been in existence for 10 years. So they were founded by a former employee of Production IG, George Wada, back in 2012. And then after the founding, Tetsuya Nakatake was placed as one of the representative directors of the studio. So the studio is actually comprised of a lot of former Production IG staff members. So that includes Kyoji Asano as an animation director, Satoshi Kadawaki, who's also an animation director, and probably one of the biggest names within the director world of anime productions, Tetsuro Araki.
Oh, of Bubble fame.
And other pretty big properties too.
Like Bubble.
And Bubble. Only Bubble.
Only Bubble. Well, the bubble burst. Anyways, so, Will, what is your opinion of Wit Studio in terms of maybe its style, what it means to you personally?
So, when we go by style, we don't necessarily mean like just basically like how it represents itself, its aesthetic, the feel of the studio, of the feel of the productions they make. But of course, there are some studios that have like a very signature style to them. Like, for example, if you talk about Studio Trigger, they have a lot of specific poses, Easter eggs, animation quality, and sequences. Kyoto Animation, very much, they do a lot of like very emotional, a lot of specific originals. And let's just say that Kyoto Animation is either really, really fluffy or you'll cry your fucking eyes out.
And their look is very...
There's a distinct look.
There's a very distinct look for sure.
Wit Studio is a little bit kind of... I wouldn't say they're like a bit of everything, but it's more because of the fact that you talk about like what a specific style there is for Wit Studio. It's kind of hard to pinpoint one. It's because they kind of have dabbled into a variety of different kinds of productions. So it's not just down to doing originals, which they do. A third of their anime productions are actually originals. It's not just down to like very, very good action sequences, even though, of course, when they do action sequences, they're really, really fucking good. I think they just try to do the best they can whenever it comes to a specific production, when it comes to a specific project. It's very much like, for example, UFO Table, where it's like, that if you're watching a UFO Table thing, that the production and the animation quality is going to be almost always a movie quality.
Yeah, and I think that Wit Studio is a name that everyone respects. Whether or not you like the work that they produce, it is a name that is definitely recognizable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it is like super like famous, but if I were to say, hey, do you like Attack on Titan Season 1, 2, and 3? Oh, you do? Just like everyone else? Yeah, well, Wit Studio did it. Oh, do you like Spy X Family? Well, they collaborated on it. So
no, I think like when it comes to like okay, within the Anosphere, right? In the Anosphere, like when we talk about
really called Anosphere,
the anime sphere. Okay, I'm just trying to compress
the
everything.
weebdom,
yes, the weebdom, right? When you talk about like top tier studios, right? We're talking, for example, like Kyoto Animation. We're talking about UFO Table, right? At the time, we were talking about Madhouse, right? I would say that Wit Studio sits at that table too. And,
absolutely,
and
yeah.
like. We're going to be covering a varying level of different productions, whether it's anime series or movies, maybe even ONAs. Whether we like the series or not, for the most part, I'm always impressed by the level of quality and art that Wit puts into their productions. So whether they're doing like really like fast-paced action, whether they're doing very scenic backdrops, their choice of color, the palettes they use, even like when it comes to like even simple things like character expressions. Right, we talk about like mouth animations. We talk about how characters like sort of symbolize emotion without saying anything. Wit always puts in a very, very good level whenever they're producing anything. And as an example, for like we'll talk about the series specifically later on, but Attack on Titan, first 3 seasons done by Wit, really, really fucking good. And whilst MAPPA with their adaptations of like the final seasons, it's also pretty good. I would still prefer watching Wit Studio in terms of like how they produced season 1, 2, and 3. Because holy fuck, some of the sequences in season 3 specifically, were
the Levi
just crazy.
That Levi traversing scene, I had to like replay that like 5 times when I first saw it. It was just so good.
It's fucking amazing. And then that then brings up the point of, for example, Vinland Saga, where season 1 was done by WIT, but season 2 is going to be done by MAPPA. So I really like season 1. It'll be interesting to see how season 2 pans out under MAPPA's direction. But I mean, this is not a slate on MAPPA. They're doing a great job. It's just that it's really hard to go up against WIT when it comes to the quality of their animation and art. Really, really hard.
So for me personally, I always, if I were to say like, oh, Kyoto Animation is all about pretty, things looking pretty and vivid, and with Studio Trigger, it's all about balls to the wall action. And if MAPPA is, for the time being, a lot of action-oriented shows.
And then there's also, like, for example, Production IG when they do, like, sports adaptations as
definitely,
well. Right?
Definitely, with Haikyuu and everything. I always attribute WIT Studio as, like, the artsy studio. I really appreciate, as you said, the aesthetics, the art, the color palette, but also the music. The orchestral pieces is fucking phenomenal.
Like, if we were to take away, like, the Hosoda stuff, maybe even the Ghibli stuff, WIT Studio is almost, like, Disney-esque level when it comes to the level of music and orchestral composition, right? Like, it's hard to compare productions when you have composers like a certain Hiroyuki Sawano, who did Attack on Titan, Kabaneri, Bubble, Seraph, Satoru Kosaki, who did the soundtrack for Vivy, and then Yutaka Yamada, who did the soundtrack for Vinland Saga. Like, all of those productions have incredible music. It's always very, very exuberant. It's always beautiful. I can never shit on WIT when it comes to the level of music they have. It's just always very encapsulating. I mean, we shit on Bubble, but holy fuck, the music is amazing for that.
It really draws you in, right? And I think it was like, we said it was an eyegasm and an eargasm, and it really is Bubble. Regardless of how you feel about everything else, it's an eye candy, and it is like ear candy, I guess. It is just really, really well done.
Yeah. One of the things that you also brought up as well is, and one thing I definitely noticed is like the juxtaposition between like the different aesthetics and culture clashes of like the East meets West.
Yeah. So this is just like a personal observation. I don't know how true it is, but I think it is somewhat, substantiated. WIT Studio embraces a lot of cross-culture stuff. So here's an example. Attack on Titan. They chose that project, they decided to do it, and they have European architecture. I
mean, also all the names are very European as fuck too, right?
Absolutely.
And it's
other than Mikasa though.
Yeah, well, other than Mikasa, yeah. But it's like it's not just like circumstance. It's not like, oh, they just happened to produce this anime or this manga. Therefore, of course, they're going to have that juxtaposition of East meets West. But you look at the rest of the catalog and you kind of find that commonality between a lot of the different productions.
Yeah, like Great Pretender is essentially Ocean's 11. And Ocean's 11 is a very... Ooh, you hear that honking?
Yeah. There's some really mad people around the studio.
Look, WIT Studio's good, guys. Just chill the fuck out.
Yeah. But back on the Great Pretender thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you look at like the sort of color palette and the character designs, you would say it's not... It's kind of weird to say. It's not standard Eastern kind of animation. It's very, very clashy with its choice of colors and its way of being able to compose characters. But at the same time, it's very much like a Japanese written story.
I think of all the studios, I have seen the most foreigners being portrayed in, like, their characters being portrayed. Obviously, they speak Japanese, but their characters being portrayed, and there are non-Japanese people.
I mean, like Vinland Saga with its Nordic background.
Yep.
You also have Ancient Magus' Bride with its European fantasy fairy tale.
Basically Harry Potter.
Fikes Family with its Eastern European kind of architecture as well.
And Vampire in the Garden with basically the video game Frostpunk or Soviet Russia. So it is... all these shows have a very unique setting that culminates into this aesthetic and this environment that, for some reason, when I see all these different settings, even though they're completely different from one another, I'll be like, yeah, that looks like a WIT Studio joint.
And for them, it's also like they definitely are a little bit particular with the productions they do. They don't just adapt everything. They look at their fortes, they look at the studio, like the staff that they have, and then it's not that they get to pick and choose. Sometimes if they need work, they will get work. But for the most part, whenever they adapt something, it's like, yeah, no, this was definitely something that would absolutely have adapted.
I feel like it's always very deliberate. Every choice that they make is very deliberate. And I think that going off of the Ancient Magus Bride, I think the fairy tale aesthetic is something that at least I have noticed as a pattern in Wit Studios' catalog. For example, Ranking of Kings, the look of it is very much like Disney, kind of like not your typical anime look, right? Would you say? Yeah.
I mean, you also wouldn't expect Wit to just pick up like a sports anime or like your standard shonen. That just doesn't seem like their kind of style, right? You wouldn't see Wit Studio. I mean, you could totally see Wit Studio doing Demon Slayer, but it's also not really their modus operandi.
Yeah. They also do like action scenes well, but I would not say that they're very kinetic all the time. Like, there are times when, Sakuga, it looks fantastic. I mean, it just looks fantastic anyways, but they up the frames per second. So
Vinland Saga, it's like, yeah, the action scenes are incredible, but it's the in-betweens, the story, the plot delivery, where it's also like, wow, like it's a very encapsulating environment, and I'm always in for like a good Wit adaptation of a good story.
And that's why I think Wit Studio is kind of the artsy, like unorthodox type of persona that they the vibe that they give me, for sure.
But they make it like very palatable too. As strange as some of the premises are for some of the stories they do.
I mean, yeah, let's think about this for a sec, right? Like Kabaneri and the Iron Fortress, right? People say it's an Attack on Titan clone. Okay, regardless, we still love it. But hey, do you like Train to Busan?
Yeah. Right?
Do you like wait, what was that? Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer was did you watch the movie or the TV series?
I watched the movie.
I watched the TV series.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. I heard the movie was also just okay.
It was okay, but it's very unique. But then what happens if we add zombies to trains?
It's fucking great.
There you go.
Yeah. I would have no problem in terms of recommending Kabaneri, which we'll go into later on. But, I mean, there's also stuff, for example, I mean, you talked about Great Pretender and how it's essentially like a heist series, like an Ocean's 11-esque thing.
Absolutely.
But it's done really fucking well. I mean, despite how we feel about the series, it's still a really good series. I still would be able to like at least say, hey, it's worth checking out.
I mean, it's not every day where a studio would have the balls to have a Japanese voice actor speak English and have it be just horrendous, but then they lean into it and they commit, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, fine. Why didn't you use the English dub? But sure.
I mean, it's not perfect, but whatever they do, they try their damn hardest.
So they have their wits about them, right?
Very, very witty.
All right. So that is sort of our general feel about how we think Wit Studio is, what they represent. One thing I would also like to mention that I forgot to mention is not only with the fairy tale aesthetic, but the future outlook for Wit Studio. So first of all, Spy X Family Part 2. Is it called Part 2? Season 1, Part 2. Oh, my God. This is going to be a trend, isn't it? I think it's going to be...
There's got to be some consistency at some point, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's just going to be, we have two seasons, we have two curves, but whether or not they're season 1, season 2, or just one whole season, we'll leave it to you to figure it out.
And having one anime season in between to kind of take a break, I think that's still a not bad decision.
Yeah. So Spy X is going to be coming out with season 2 or part 2 in fall 2022.
So very soon.
And then we also have a Ranking of Kings special coming out sometime in 2023.
Right, which got announced quite recently. And then there is the big boy, which is Brothers Grimm.
Yeah, Grimm.
And with Netflix.
They're also doing Moonrise as well. So 2 original net animations. They're still under development. The announcement dates for those have not been released yet. But yeah, there's still going to be more stuff to come out from Wit. And I think going forward...
Is it Clamp that's also partnering with Wit Studio?
I think so. Yeah.
Because I remember... Yeah, okay. Yeah, it is Clamp. Yeah.
So I think like the future outlook is that there's going to be consistency anyway, right? I mean, the fact that they're doing like weird fairy tale kind of things, they're still like building up that kind of repertoire of doing more unorthodox like adaptations. I think that's just going to be consistent going forward for Wit Studio.
And I think Wit Studio is a studio that everyone needs to know.
So we will be going on to a break shortly, but before we go into that, whilst we are going to be covering a lot of Wit productions, whether it's anime series, movies, OVAs, ONAs, whatever it may be, there's also a lot of stuff we won't be covering, and there's going to be specific reasons as to why. So we're going to go into those, and if you hear these and we're not going to be going over it, we're sorry, but just hear us out.
All right. So, Will, are we going to talk about the shows that we have mentioned before, or are we going to go straight into these are things that will not be covered? Sorry.
Some stuff, like, for example, like your typical Spy X Families and with anime Attack on Titans, we will briefly discuss, but because we talked about them a lot already, we won't go that deep into it. But this section is specifically stuff we will not cover at all. So, on the television series side, there's going to be 3 specific series we're not going to go into. Kodama no Konjiro, which is a children's show and it's not streamed online. Garu Gaku, Saint Girls Square Academy, which is like a 3-minute idol series that's based on the group Girls Squared. And, kind of idol things are not really our thing.
So I'm looking at this docket list section for things we don't cover. I don't really know almost all of them, except for obviously Pokemon the movie and HAL. I know HAL. I know Onippon. Is that airing right now?
Yeah, it either aired now or it's airing the season previously. But again, it's also a 3-minute series. It's part of like a TV Tokyo's children variety program, Ohasuta. Again, not really our thing. So yeah, those are the 3 series we're not going to go into. Films. There's a lot of films that we're not going to go into. HAL, which I think was like one of the first movies they did. I just haven't got around to watching it.
I think of all the things that we don't cover, I think HAL is the one that I am most interested in checking out. Whether or not it's a good or bad show or bad movie, I don't know. But it's the one that stands out to me the most. I mean,
it's the first movie they did, so it should be worth checking out. We just didn't get around to watching it because time's a bitch, right?
We're not going to do all of the recap movies because they're recap movies.
So that's all of the Attack on Titan movies, which is parts 1 and 2, which covers the first season. The War of Awakening, which covers second season, and Chronicle, which condenses all 3 seasons together. And then, of course, we're also not going to be talking about Kabaneri movies, which is just parts 1 and 2, though there are movies that we'll talk about later on, simply because parts 1 and 2 are recap movies. We're also not going to be talking about Empire of Corpses. Again, just never really got around to watching it, and the premise was also just not really that interesting to us.
I've never heard of it.
It's a 2-hour-long movie, so that's a long time for us to figure out if we like the movie or not.
Apparently, Laughing Under the Clouds Gaiden. I've never heard of that either, but okay, we're not covering it.
Yeah, Laughing Under the Clouds, the TV series, is streamable, but it's not.
Oh, it's Doga Kobo.
Yeah, so it was done by Doga Kobo, so not going to be discussed in a Wit Studio analysis. And the movie itself, not streamable unless you pay Amazon for it, and we're cheap bastards. We're not paying for it.
And then there's a Pokemon movie. So
The Power of Us.
Yeah, and
we've lived Pokemon for like 2/3, if not almost all of our lives. At this point, it's if you're still playing or watching Pokemon, hey, good for you.
My friend was a coworker was playing Pokemon Emerald yesterday on his phone.
Oh, awesome! Like I like the early generation Pokemon games, no doubt. But it's like Sword and Shield and whatever came out afterwards. No, I haven't got around to
I did X and Y as well.
That was the DS one, right?
I think yeah, it's the DS one because I didn't own a Switch. So
that was when like Pokemon Black and White came out too. Then yeah, so the previous generation before it's on Switch. So look, we're not going to go over the Pokemon stuff. Sorry, but hey, if you're still playing it, good for you.
So we won't go over things like music videos and video games, which a lot of these studios produce on the side as well. I mean, earlier we talked about Studio Trigger doing a commercial for Delicious in Dungeon. So it comes to no surprise that Wit Studio or any other studio also has these kind of, I won't call it side hustles, but like mini projects.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do want to mention is OVAs and ONAs, and we won't go over any of them. But there's one that I do want to mention, which is the Ancient Magus Bride OVA that is airing on Crunchyroll, but it's also simultaneously released with volume 16, 17, and 18. So
those are like the 3-episode prequels, right?
So it's an anime original story, and I think the name is like a really, really long ass name. I'm trying to like find it right now. Okay, it is called The Ancient Magus Bride: The Boy from the West and the Night of the Mountain Haze.
Yeah. You've watched it though, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Because I'm waiting for the third episode that is supposed to come out September 22nd, because that's when the 18th volume comes out.
So you got a month from now then.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a specific reason why we're not going to go over the OVAs and some ONAs. But yeah, we will be covering a lot of the good stuff. So don't worry, there's still a lot of stuff for you to listen to. And if we're covering stuff you haven't watched before, there's going to be a bunch of reasons why they're worth checking out. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll go into the nitty-gritty of today's discussion with Studio. Welcome back to episode 41, the second half. We are going to be going into the Wit Studio analysis. It's still Will, it's still Jason. Jason's still wearing the same glasses, so that's good.
Yep,
Continuity is always good for us. So we went into not just only the news, but also a little bit of a preamble in terms of how we're going to be formatting today's episode. So as we're going to be going over...
we're wiping the episode? We're reformatting it as like...
well, as in essentially like stuff that we won't be talking about. We already listed that.
So journal case sensitive or FAT 32.
ASA or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
American standards.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Sorry. Will, we are talking about Wit Studio.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like, because we went over like stuff that we're not going to be mentioning, right? We talked about some of the series we're not going to go over, some of the movies, a lot of the movies actually. So we're just going straight into the stuff that is listed on our mostly recommended, or at least like stuff that we have watched and will be willing to review for the second
Right.
half.
But I actually think that we should have a bit of a section on shows that are either, well, like we called it brief discussions, which is we want to touch on it, but we don't really want to go in depth into it.
So they're either in this section because no brainers, like you actually have already watched it, or like you absolutely should watch it, and then other ones which is like we've kind of featured like at varying lengths throughout the past seasons of the GAP. So really no need to dedicate that much more time in terms of explaining why or why not you should watch something.
But we also don't want to ignore them because, for example, Attack on Titan season 1, 2, and 3. To me, this is obviously a very important, very impactful show. But to me, this was the moment that I knew about Wit Studio. And I did not know Wit Studio before Attack on Titan. Now, of course, I have went back and watched some stuff, but I did not know Wit Studio was Wit Studio until Attack on Titan.
I mean, it was the first thing they did, right? 2013 was the first season, and then they waited like, what, I think it was like 6 years before season 2 came out.
Yeah, it was 2 curves, right? The first season.
Yeah, and then like season 2, season 3 took like a long time. Like there's a lot of stuff that came out in between the first season and second season. So we'll be covering a lot of those. Other things we're not really going to be going into.
Quick thing about Attack on Titan though. Will, what do you think about the move to MAPPA for Attack on Titan the final season?
Well, I mentioned it in the first half that I think that it's a job well done so far by MAPPA. I don't have any issues with like the character quality or like the animation quality. I know that a lot of people were like, this looks like shit, this is like garbage compared to Wit, but I
remember we watched the first episode of the final season.
I've watched a fair amount of them,
and the 3D we thought was okay.
I didn't have any issues really in terms of animation. Yeah, it looks different.
It looks like 3D, but
it looks different for sure, but it's also not like bad either. Like I still very much enjoyed what MAPPA had done,
and will do. Right,
I just preferred what Studio had done before.
Right.
So if you haven't watched any of Attack on Titan, go do that.
Yep.
Also, we're not going to be talking much about Vivy, Flourite I's song, because we have already simped the fuck out of Vivy. Fucking great.
Yeah, if you have a studio that we think is very well known for orchestral music or just music in general, and then they're also very well known for having a very clean, aesthetic, visual look, well then guess what? Combine the two and you get VVN with an original sci-fi script. There you go.
Yeah, the music composer for it, Satoru Kasaki, fucking phenomenal job. So that's our 2 cents on Vivy again.
Now, Spy X Family, like, come on. How many times have we to mention this? Spy X Family is awesome.
Yep. So the first season finished up in spring 2022, and the second season is going to be coming out in the following season. So we just did the summer review not too long ago, And so now we're going to be waiting for fall 2022 for the second season or the
spring,
second part. Right? Yes, no, spring was season 1.
Yeah,
Fall,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So the upcoming season, which is season 2 or part 2, however you want to name it, will be coming out in fall. So, I mean, Spy's been fucking great.
I do think, though, we should also mention briefly that the score on my anime list dropped dramatically after the finale of part 1 or season 1. And I think that is largely due to what Will and I thought would be included as the finale episode. But no, they're saving it, I guess, for the premiere of part 2 or season 2, essentially.
Yeah, they definitely need to have some like meat in the bones for the second part, right? So it makes sense why they wanted to carry it over, but at the same time,
I wanted to see it
a
so
lot of
bad.
people were really hyped for what was to be expected for that last episode. So, you know, understandable the score dropped, but overall I still think like Spy X, I know Spy X Family is a worthy watch.
Because it was in the stinger, right? Like the post-credit scene, but then the finale didn't address any of it.
I don't remember actually, because we read the manga. Is that how it played out as well, or because it probably was?
It was that was the issue. It was.
So they, you can't fault them for trying to be faithful to the source. But yeah, no, absolutely watch Spy X Family and then get ready for part 2.
Bubble would be the next movie that we're going to talk about briefly, and
we've said it already. Artistically, in terms of like the music as well, fucking phenomenal. Plot and characters, though,
I don't think it's a waste of your time, but I think I say the exact same thing, which is there are better uses of your time.
It's just hard to lower your expectations when you have that crazy like staff and voice acting list on there.
I do think like the lineup produced something that I thought was very underwhelming.
Tetsuro Araki, Gen Urobuchi, Naoko Sato, and Renji Oki, Hiroyuki Sawano as well. Obata as the character designer. It's like, how could you not be hyped for it?
We were, for sure.
I mean, like, and definitely, like, character design was great. Music was great. Action was great. The writing was not as great, though. And so you do...
There was writing?
We implore... Exactly, right? We implore you to at least go in with lowered expectations. I know it's hard after we just, listed out a rock star staff cast and voice acting cast as well. So it's still a good movie, but with an asterisk.
Right. The next briefly discussed show is Kabaneri and of the Iron Fortress, which is a show that Will and I love a lot. People say it's an Attack on Titan clone, like in between.
It makes sense because like during that little break where season 1 ended and then season 2 began for Attack on Titan, Kabaneri was released slam bang right in the middle. Mm-hmm. So not only the TV series, but also like the 3-part movie that came out with it as well.
The Battle for Ueno, I think.
Yeah. So it was... I think
it was on Netflix, right?
Yes. All the movies and the TV series was on there, and I thought it was fucking phenomenal. Because one day when we were watching it, you're like, "Hey, Will, get on Discord, check this shit out." Okay, sure. It's called Kabaneri. It's like, oh, I've seen it on my Netflix to watch. Okay, maybe I'll check it out. The first episode, fucking lit, fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, actually, do you remember that day? Because I think it was one of those things like, oh yeah, it's on Netflix. The score is okay. Like, let's just see what's this about. Like, we were extremely pleasantly surprised.
It was more than. I was just like, dude, this is actually really fucking. I don't know why people are giving it such low scores. And by low, we're meaning like low to mid 7s, which is by all means not a bad score.
It's not a bad score,
but it's also like kind of rough to paint it with the same brush as Attack on Titan, even though it is done by the same people and it was released like a year or two after Attack on Titan season 1 came out. So I understand the comparisons, but I think if you just watched it as a standalone without any sort of AOT biases with it, you will very much enjoy watching Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress along with the 3 movies that came along with it.
I think the Battle for Ueno was very well paced and is basically a sequel, a very worthy sequel, and hopefully they will have more because they need to have more. It's awesome.
Yep. Great Pretender. We talked about it a couple seasons ago. And okay, look, aesthetically wonderful,
music wise also wonderful. The whole international globe-trotting part of it, very good.
Some of the funky jazz that comes along with it as well,
fantastic.
But the plot itself is, whilst a good story wasn't necessarily the best executed.
I just remember very not fondly, just very vividly that a lot of how things get resolved was not because of the skills of the characters, but almost in many ways just sheer dumb luck, which in certain instances is fine, but when it's literally every time, to me, that is just a little bit like either lazy writing or just bad writing. So I still think Great Pretender as a production, and I think that's with any Wit Studio property, the production value is just top notch, top class.
No questions whatsoever. It's just the delivery of the plot and how certain things were solved. It just left us wanting more.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's still a solid 8 for me.
Yeah, and you finished it. I dropped it after like the first half because they split it in terms of locations, right? In terms of release.
It's like France and Shanghai and whatever. So you basically just dropped it before
in Dubai, I think.
I think there was at least somewhere in the Middle East, maybe Dubai. So you dropped it right before they did the Shanghai arc,
yes,
which is the last part that came out because they staggered the releases, right?
Yes, per location, and people said that the Shanghai arc is actually really good. So.
I liked it. I liked Shanghai. It wasn't enough for it to be pushed to a 9 for me, but overall, like I still enjoyed it. I can still be nitpicky with it, right? So it's good. It could have been great, but it's still worth a watch if you have a Netflix subscription.
All right, so that is the end of all the briefly discussed shows, and now we will go over the stuff that we watched specifically for this episode for Wit Studio properties. Will, which one you want to start with?
So I spent a lot of time rewatching a specific series in the past 2 weeks. This was actually a series I started up watching maybe 3 years ago on Netflix, and it's still on Netflix. I'm speaking about Seraph of the End, which was a shonen series that debuted season 1 in spring of 2015. It's based on the manga of the same name. The manga itself is still running, and so far, like in terms of like the score, it's doing pretty decently. Season 1 was around a 7.49. Season 2 was a 7.52. So a 7.62. Sorry. So generally, it's quite well received in terms of the male fandom. What's the story about? It's essentially about vampires and vampire slayers trying to battle out for supremacy in the world. And two best friend orphans who are separated due to deathly circumstances, having to make do with the new lives they have and trying to make sense of what it means to be human, what it means to be a vampire. So essentially good and bad, but what's really the gray area between being good and bad? Very typical shonen series, I have to say. So whilst I enjoyed watching some of it, overall, though, I felt that whilst watching Seraph at the End, it felt like I had already watched a lot of it from other series.
Because it's very edgy, right? Like,
but it borrows like elements of edginess from like Tokyo Ghoul.
Right.
And Tokyo Ghoul is humans versus vampires, or humans versus ghouls specifically, right? And then there's also elements of like Blue Exorcist. There's elements of Demon Slayer, even though Demon Slayer came out much later. In terms of the manga source and the anime, right? So it's not a very very unique take on the shonen kind of genre. There were also parts that I felt were just egregious in terms of introducing certain powers, certain characters, and okay, I'm just gonna spoil just a teeny bit.
Okay. Before you do that, though, I just want to sort of give you my 2 cents on Seraph of the End, which is I've not seen a single episode, but in terms of hearing about people's opinions of this show,
in my opinion,
right, because it's massively popular, I have heard a lot of Seraph of the End and how good or bad or just generic it is. But Will,
I mean, it's doing well. I mean, the fact that I think it was as of October 2021, it had 13 million copies of the manga in circulation,
and still going.
It's still going. The problem is, though, the reason why there isn't a third season and beyond is because there are certain series like Chainsaw Man and Demon Slayer that are completely like shattering records. So why put all your time and effort into Seraph of the End when there's other series that's just going to completely blow Seraph of the End out of the water?
Do you think Seraph of the End would have been like really praised upon if it was like 20 years ago.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, like 20 years ago was also when Naruto was around.
Right.
So I think at that point you would then be going up against the behemoth that is Bleach and Naruto and One Piece. So I feel like Seraph at the end was always going to play second fiddle, no matter what. And
the spoiling thing you said?
Yeah, they introduced ninjutsu in it. And
shut the fuck up. No.
Yeah, there's
Will.
There's flying daggers.
You're fucking around.
There's also like Kagebunshi no Jutsu, and then there's Genjutsu as
well.
No,
Will, don't do this.
That's the part where I was like, what the fuck is going on?
No, this is a lie, right?
No, it's not. And that's why I was also like, do my eyes deceive me here? What's going on?
This is not a bit, listeners. Like, I've not heard this.
No,
really?
Yeah, and that's where I was just like, you've lost me now, because there was like no explanation as to how these powers existed. You knew that like the people who were in the series, some of them had like sort of more supernatural like superpowers, and there was explanation behind it. But then there were others where it's just like, where did this power come from? What purpose does it serve?
I just thought it's Vampire Knights versus like high school nights,
and that's where the problem of Seraph at the end comes in, where it really tries hard to be edgy. It tries hard to harp on the shonen aspects that typical shonen fans would really enjoy, like super OP powers, super amazing like action sequences. And the other thing about this as well is, whilst I've praised the animation quality and the music quality of all of Wit's works, unfortunately, I felt Seraph at the end was one of the weakest ones, and which is weird because the music is also composed by Sawano. So there are bits and pieces where the music is actually incredibly solid, but there are a lot of parts within Seraph at the end that had a lot of silence in terms of like no music, no background sounds, just speech. And that's where I was just like, this actually does not feel like a Wit production. Yes, the action sequences and the animation quality were good, but it felt inferior compared to, I think it's just the fact that, 2 years before it, Attack on Titan came out, Kabaneri came out around the same time. So when you compare it to those productions, yeah, Seraph at the end
overshadowed.
It looks very B tier. In the end, I gave both seasons a 7, not because they were like bad. I still enjoyed watching them, but you know how like sometimes when you're watching, when you watch a series, you're 100% focused. You don't do anything else. You don't have anything to do in the background.
Well, not always, but yes, I know exactly where you're going with this.
I went out to the bathroom, came back, went out to the kitchen, pulled some water, came back, went out to the
check
balcony,
your phone for your emails,
and for like the whole 10-15 minutes I was doing that, I didn't miss a single beat of Seraph at the end, and that's where the another issue comes in. The plot itself is so easy to follow that I did not need to focus to fully understand. When you are able to cook and watch at the same time and not read the subtitles, but when you plug back in and you just know what's going on, that's an issue. That's a problem. It's not, okay, fine. I get to consume everything. I understand it. Wonderful. But it felt like
it doesn't captivate you.
No,
it doesn't keep your attention.
It doesn't. And that's why it's never going to breach a 7. It's good, but there's just a lot of holes that just don't really get explained. Some of the character decisions are kind of like, why would this even be a good decision to begin with?
So it is not the end, but the mid point.
Oh, I hate that you said that, but it's very mid.
Yeah,
it's a very mid show. It's not a bad show. It's just it could have been a lot better. And look,
do they actually address Seraph? Do you know what Seraph is like? An angel, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it does make an appearance in the series in the second season, but I think it's not a hard sell to people, but it's one of those, if you've watched a lot of Demon Slayer, Bleach, Naruto,
it just sounds irrelevant now.
It doesn't. It's definitely like it made up for like that little gap that we had in the mid 2010s when there wasn't really a lot of good shonen. I mean that was around the time when like you also had like Black Clover, you had Fairy Tail, you had Seven Deadly Sins and all that. Just a lot of very mid shows. I mean, I know Black Clover, Seven Deadly Sins, Fairy Tail, they're all extremely popular, but let's be real. They're not amazing shows. They're all very mid shonen shows that filled in the gap of when you didn't have Attack on Titan, when you didn't have Tokyo Ghoul manga, when you didn't have Demon Slayer coming out yet. So it's in a weird spot. I would not like completely bash on Seraph, but I definitely had more problems than positives to say about the series. Personally, it's one of the weaker productions from WIT, unfortunately.
All right. So then that is Seraph of the End. The next show that we're going to talk about is a 2022 show called The Girl from the Other Side. And this is an OVA that, or technically I guess is an, no, because they came out with Blu-ray, so it would be an OVA that WIT Studio produced. But then this time it is funded on Kickstarter. And disclaimer here, Will and I contributed to the Kickstarter project. So
good job, GAP.
Yeah, GAP, our credit is on the credit roll, so that's pretty cool.
So at the beginning when we talked about The Girl from the Other Side, it was mostly because of the fact that we wanted to at least show that, there was a Kickstarter project going on. We had spent a lot of time funding it. There's also people like honking their horns.
They don't like you, man.
They just don't like the fact that we're shilling
because we're talking about this on the other side. So
yeah.
The Girl from the Other Side, though, is a very, very well-known manga. Like, by Nagabe. And how good is it? It's an 8.31, ranked 272, popularity 228, and it's all done with 11 volumes. You can read it right now on Seven Seas Entertainment, and it's just great. So one of the things that I really like about the manga is that it literally looks like a fairy tale, but drawn in manga form. And not only that, but it kind of tells like this actually very depressing and grim story, but behind this backdrop of black and white and gray, but it looks just fantastic.
I mean, a lot of the color palette is literally just white, black, different shades of white, black, gray, and green.
Sometimes they throw a curveball and there would be a blue, but yeah, like it's in many ways supposed to look very drab and just very uninteresting, but it's somehow through WIT Studios' magic somehow makes it that it is just extremely engrossing. The story is kind of like there's this disease going around, and there's this little girl, innocent girl, who's dressed in all white, and then there is her sensei, who is kind of like this shadowy creature and is in all black, and they can't touch each other because she will be infected with this disease. And then it talks about them going on a journey to figure out how to like solve this issue, and then they meet other inhabitants and other people, and it just gets more and more complicated and more symbolic and metaphors everywhere. And the anime, the 3-part anime or the one movie, goes into very little of the story. There's a lot of slice of life aspects. They go a little bit into kind of the themes of The Girl from the Other Side, but you can't do much in like a 3-episode OVA or what equivalent of like a 1.5-hour movie. So
would you say that Girl from the Other Side is like that epitome of that unorthodox, magical, like mystical fantasy aesthetic that
absolutely
WIT is known for?
And things look kind of blurry, but then it's like an aesthetic choice rather than a competency issue. So I think The Girl from the Other Side, I gave it an 8. I think the average score is a 7.52, which is, I think, a very fair score.
Well, speaking on that then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you talked a lot about the positives of Girl from the Other Side. Were there any parts where you felt like it wasn't as good as you were hoping, or
it wasn't enough? That was the issue. I think in terms of the aesthetic part, which is a big part of The Girl from the Other Side, I'm sold on that. And I think anybody who watches it is sold on the look. The issue becomes all the things that are implied or developed over the course of 11 volumes of the manga, and very little, if not any of that, is in the anime.
Cool. Now we're going to move into a series that I think if we're talking about the usual WIT aesthetic and style, this one doesn't really fall under that, but nonetheless, it's still a fantastic series. We're going to be talking about Hozuki's Coolheadedness. So it was a series that's based on the manga of the same name by Natsumi Eguchi, who did the story and the art. And it is published in English. Originally, the Japanese name is Hozuki no Retetsu, and the English is published by Kodansha Comics USA as of March 21, 2017. So there were 2 seasons for it. First season premiered in winter of 2014. Second season came out in the fall of 2017.
And the scores for the manga source and the 2 seasons are like high 7, so 7.6, 7.7, 7.8. Actually, like, wow, it's incremental. But
I'm just gonna say this: Hozuki's Coolheadedness is the Gintama of Wit's portfolio.
yeah, I can see that. So Hozuki's Coolheadedness is very much a slice of life, but it takes place in hell.
It's a slice of life workplace comedy.
Yes, because the main character, Hozuki, has to literally manage the inhabitants of hell, or like figure out how to put out metaphorical fires in hell, which is like the workplace, essentially.
God damn, people are fucking angry today.
We apologize because we moved our recording venue to a more residential area, so sometimes shit happens.
It's also Saturday, so that means weekend drivers are going to be very, very trigger happy with that air horn.
And also because there's just a lot of people, more people. Yeah.
Yep. So
you got to keep a cool head.
With the depiction of hell here, it's of course hell in Japanese is Jikoku, and they have their own sort of like ideology, their own sort of like spiritual representations of what hell is. So much in the way that there's different layers of hell, there's also like in Japanese mythology there are different kinds of hell. There's like hell for people who commit murders, hell for people
like
who
circles, right?
Yeah. There's like a circle of hell that is for people who commit serious fraud, theft,
and then like murder and like assault, right?
Yeah. So that's where it's like the funny part of the workplace, because each circle of hell is a different department within hell, and Hozuki has to go around and manage everything in terms of like hiring people, in terms of doing HR responsibilities, payroll, making sure logistics are smooth. It sounds boring as shit, but when you add it into...
They have a cafeteria, dude.
Which actually looks kind of awesome,
it's
too.
Awesome.
I love the part as well where like at the end of each long the cafeteria table, there's a TV at the end. Like that...
And they just watch, yeah. And special shout out to the opening title sequence, which is like
fucking good,
the dumbest dance sequence I have ever seen for Wit Studio. I mean, there's not a lot of dance sequences in any of the Wit Studio properties, but
you just want to march like on the spot. You just want to go like hi ho the whole time. And it's fucking great. I have nothing really bad to say about Hozuki. It's only just the fact that like I've watched a lot of Gintama and I really like Gintama, that it's kind of unfair but also like no brainer that like I would compare it to Gintama. But I enjoy Hozuki as its own. I do like what it represents, the comedy style it has, and as well, it's just it's just a fun old time.
And here's the thing: we were talking about hell, we're talking about demons, we're talking about like being in different like sections of hell. But actually, the show is quite lighthearted, and in many ways, like, for example, Hozuki's boss, who is Satan, essentially, is like this guy that just, like, is kind of a softie.
And there's also, like, different depictions of, like, different ideologies of hell. There's an Egyptian hell, there's a Christian hell, and it's, again, like, I understand that when you go into the topics of, hell, you would then sort of correlate with the topics of religion. It doesn't do anything like insensitive.
Or like sin, or yeah.
It doesn't do anything insensitive. It doesn't sort of like bash on other representations of religion and all that.
They just treat it as is, right?
It's very, very light. It's The Office, basically.
Yes.
It's very lighthearted, but some of the comedy beats are really well written, and it's also because of the fact that yes, it is modeled after the Japanese ideology of hell, but you don't necessarily need to understand a lot of the backstory.
Is it Shintoism?
Yeah. So or it's like Shinto, Buddhist. There's a good mixture of it, right? So there are certain stories behind like each episode where it's like if you know the story about it, it hits different. But you can also go in just completely blind and not know a single thing about Japanese mythology, but still be okay.
Would you say it's very episodic, so there's no through line, really?
I mean, there will be like continuing themes throughout, right? Like character interactions, little like B plots that kind of carry over from episodes.
Returning characters, right?
But like I think even then, it's like you could just plug in one episode and you wouldn't be that lost. You would be able to understand 90% of what's happening on screen.
Then would you say season 1 and 2 is roughly the same in terms of quality and what you expect?
I think that's where it is, like those kinds of like slice of life comedies where like unless they start introducing some serious plot continuations, you're not going to be experiencing a lot of like very unique storylines from season to season. But that's not a bad thing either.
I think for slice of life, the same old is actually never really an insult unless if the same thing is really bad.
Yeah, it's like if you like season 1, then season 2 is just more of season 1, and that's like if you like it, why not watch more of it?
Last question. Last thing I will say is Hozuki is not scary whatsoever except for one thing. There's a lot of them in the show, and it's a flower. I would just say that. I would just say that.
Nightmare fuel. Goddamn. When they first introduced it, that was like the first thing I talked to Jason about, other than the fact that, oh, this is a good show, but what the fuck are those things?
Yeah, so you'll know it when you see it. So, but I quite like the show as well. Seems Will, you like the show a lot.
I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much. Now, moving on to from the workplace comedies, now going into workplace romances. We're talking about After the Rain.
So, After the Rain is based on the manga of the same name by Jun Mayuzuki, who did the story and art. God damn it. I'm like staring at it from a distance. Premiered in winter 2018, based on the manga. I think it is out. I forgot which manga printing publisher. But the raw score for the manga is a 7.79, and the mouse score is 7.50 for the anime.
Yeah. So I watched this about 2-3 weeks ago. You only just finished it recently.
Right. But I read the whole manga from beginning to end like a while ago.
So you already knew what's up.
I already knew what's up.
So it's an interesting take on the sort of workplace romantic slice of life, in that it's very much an age gap. It's an age gap story.
Right. So an age gap romance where the main female character is a high school girl, and the guy is the manager of the restaurant where they work, and he is like mid-40s, divorced, has a kid type thing. And it talks about kind of their romance, but it's when I say age gap romance, you might think of things like Koikimo or Higehiro, and it might infer a lot of things.
It's a very questionable plot basis. I understand that, but it would be unfair to paint it with the same brush.
I think one of the first things I said was this is the most wholesome, like respectable way to do age gap romance, if I could even say that. And I still think that belief is real today.
Like with Koikimo, I don't know shit about that one, so you can talk more about it. But with Higehiro, it's like trying to blend a mixture of that romance part and also the part about characters like baggage, emotional and physical baggage. Whereas with After the Rain, there is like romantic beats, but it's more of a product that stems from the everlasting and overbearing effects of each individual character's emotional baggage. And that's like very much the focus of After the Rain. These characters that we talk about are very much in really bad places, not necessarily knowing what direction they want to take in life, but being able to find comfort in each other's company, to the point where it gets to the point where they start wondering, is this really just comfort? Is this just like safety? Or are we actually starting to develop like romantic feelings for each other? And that's where that sort of exploration of that age gap romance becomes a little bit more wholesome than, like risque and like NSFW,
Right, because the romance part is treated rather pure and innocent, but at the backdrop of two flawed people trying to figure out what to do about their current situation and how to move on.
Right. There's nothing like egregiously etchy about it at all. So like
zero.
So it's like that's 1 point above Higehiro already. Even though Higehiro is not a bad show.
I don't think. I think Koikimo's a bad show though.
Yeah. The less talked about that, the better.
Right. So Will, I'm actually very curious to how you feel about the anime, because I thought the manga was a 9 out of 10. I end up giving the anime an 8 out of 10, and I think the tone is relatively the same but different at the same time.
I think it just comes down to the fact that, okay, spoiler alert here, give it like 2 seconds. The adaptation is not 100% faithful.
Yes,
there's a different ending to both the anime and the manga, and I think it's just because of the fact that there's a lot more story that is told in the manga. Characters are expressed differently. Some characters are given more time to flesh out their backstory, whereas with a 12 episode, like a single cur anime, especially when you're talking about romance, it's very hard to be able to tell a full story without cutting certain things, without rushing certain things, and it's very, very clear. The ending for After the Rain is very rushed. But I think it was also done not just as a business decision, but also just so that you can encapsulate the whole series and push people to go and read the manga.
So the thing was that the anime ended before the manga ended. So they had to... What I can tell you is that having read and also watched the show, the ending is... The spirit or message of both endings are very similar. But the way that they went about it is different, and I think the manga was way more elegant. I also think that the ending in either of these cases is not what you may necessarily think it will end. And I think a lot of people had that issue that, oh, I thought it was going to go one way, but it ended up not being the other way. It ended up being the other way. And to me, that kind of bittersweet imperfection I thought was the whole point of the show.
Yeah, I think like there were a lot of people that were kind of upset with how it ended. Let me tell you this: if you read the ending for the manga, you'd be even more upset.
Yes, I was more upset,
right?
For sure.
So like you would. This is one of those things where it's like I hate to say just to tell people to grow up, but like nothing is ever perfect. You can never expect like when things are supposed to go well that they will go well. Sometimes shit happens and you don't get the ending that you want. And that's kind of the point of these endings, especially with After the Rain. You look at this and yes, it is titled as an age gap romance, but you explore every side of the spectrum of romance. It's like just because some people have good relationships is not the same thing for everyone else. And it's the focus on the everything else that I think makes After the Rain a very good watch. I gave it an 8 out of 10 as well. I would very much recommend it.
So last thing I will say about the manga and the anime is that the anime is way more upbeat and cutesy and literally bubbly. Whereas in the manga, it was almost more silent and more... I mean, not because you can't hear a manga, obviously, but because it just felt more serious and more... I guess melancholy is the more accurate term. So when I was watching the anime, I was quite surprised at how upbeat, especially the OP and ED is fantastic, by the way.
It's a fun opening and ending, yeah.
But it just is like not what I expected After the Rain would be. But nonetheless, if there was an age gap romance that I would say is very acceptable in terms of being crowd pleasing and good,
and actually you can watch it in public.
Yes, and actually having growth and development and not have it be basically a pseudo porn, then yes, After the Rain is a very good watch.
On to the next ONA. We featured one earlier, Girl from the Other Side. Now we're going to go into Vampire in the Garden. Actually, no. Is Girl from the Other Side an ONA or an OVA?
It's technically an OVA because they came out with Blu-rays.
Right. Oh, and there was also stuff from before as well. So I guess, yeah, OVA would make more sense. Anyways, we're going to go into one of the ONAs that Twitch Studio has produced, Vampire in the Garden. Now, I'll just say it right now. I haven't watched a single episode of it, but you've watched all 6 episodes, is it?
5
episodes.
So, Vampire in the Garden is an anime original exclusive on Netflix. As I said, there's 5 episodes, and it was released on May 16th, 2022. With a MAL score of 7.14.
So not necessarily a great score, but it's still an okay score. Do you feel that that's a fair reflection of Vampire in the Garden?
In this world that is like kind of like Cold War Soviet Russia. So if you've ever played the video game Frostpunk, imagine that. Or the world in Fire Punch, but like in terms of like how cold and depressed everything is. But in this world, Will, there are vampires and there are humans. And they don't get along. But it just so happens that a human girl and a vampire queen both are sick of the fact that the two sides are fighting. And they decide to escape together to go to this supposedly paradise where both races are able to coexist in peace and harmony, but things don't always go so well or as planned. I think Vampire in the Garden is basically the same issues I had with Bubble. except not as drastic in every sense of the word. It doesn't look as good as Bubble. It doesn't sound as good as Bubble, but it sounds pretty damn good with its orchestral track. It also is very, very gorgeous. Because in this world, they kind of do this book burning thing where they like burn all music and all sorts of entertainment, because in this world, like, the vampires can hear it, so then they'll be able to track you down. And they call like humans worms, like warm bodies. So it's very heavy-handed. There's a very heavy Yuri undertone as well, because it's the two like females, and they both imply very heavily that previously they both were like in some sort of relationship or friendship or more than friendship with other females. And overall, it's a very generic show about war is bad, don't hate.
War never ends.
War never ends. Like, you know, you should learn to love one another. I don't really know what else to say. In 5 episodes, you don't really can do much. I think earlier I think last episode or 2 episodes ago, you're talking about Kagurui Twin and have that being 6 episodes. But because it was 6 episodes and it was just 6 25-minute episodes, I think in this case it was 5 like 35 or 30-minute episodes. This is like slightly longer. It kind of is just like the plot in Vampire in the Garden is like super, super rushed. Like all of a sudden, things just happen like in succession, and it shouldn't. There should be like more build up, or you went from like traveling in a car to all of a sudden be in a hotel to all of a sudden in a submarine or whatever. And it's just like, where was everything in between? But you know.
But overall, it's a decent show at least, right?
There's a lot of blood, a lot of action, and I think I gave it a 7 at the end, and I still think it's a good show.
It's a respectable score.
It's a very respectable score, and it's not a bad show.
It's not a bust, right?
No.
Yeah. Okay, on to the next one. Now, this is a show that Jason has talked about multiple times throughout the history of GAP, but it was only recently that I actually got around to watching all of Ancient Magus's Bride. So as a reminder, it is based on a manga of the same name, published in English by Seven Seas Entertainment. I can't remember when it actually aired, but it was at least like 5-6 years ago. You can pull that up.
Yeah, I'll pull that up.
Yeah. So manga score, very respectable, very, very respectable, 8.36, and the anime is an 8.07. So still a very good score. Now, after hearing Jason go on and on and on about Ancient Magus's Bride, it's not hard to tell that, you know, Jason really likes this show, and the fact that we're also doing a Wit Studio analysis, I had to watch this. I'd say that the story itself is very well written, and it's a very compelling tale on that mystical fantasy sort of atmosphere mixed in with a lot of supernatural shadiness. It essentially follows the character Chise Hattori, who is a young high school girl from Japan, who is sold at an auction and bought by a mystery buyer and then transported to London to live out her life under the tutelage of this skulled man named Elias Ainsworth. It is then told to her that there is a certain path that she needs to take, and as she starts going further and further down this road, more and more mysteries start to unfold. More about this new supernatural life that she leads start to come towards her, and therefore, like, this is one of those things where, you know, as you start unfolding more of the mystery, your actions then lead to consequences, and this is very much a show where you start seeing this young girl who felt so unloved and so lonely in the beginning part of her life, and slowly becoming a much more mature and self-aware young woman. That's in the end, you just start seeing this girl sort of go from a toothless, very, very harmless girl, into a very much feared, smart, and very diligent woman. It's a very well told story,
and there's also romance between the Beauty and the Beast, essentially.
Very much so. Now, you talk about like the plot, you talk about the delivery, the characters, the character designs, and the character stories are all really, really good. I like that part of the anime. And it's also one of those where it's almost oh shit, what was that series with that sage who goes around clearing like mystical deities, not Mononoke,
Mystical deities?
you know how there's like little curses in different villages, and that guy with the one eye goes around clearing stuff. You know which one I'm talking about.
Shit, it sounds really familiar. Go.
The one with the English opening. I walked 10,000 miles.
Mushishi.
Yeah, Mushishi. It's very much in that kind of.
Well, that took us that long to figure out that. Dude, my god.
Yeah. So it's very much like told in that kind of aesthetic where it's a very, very slow paced anime series. And it takes maybe like 2 or 3 episodes to really go through like one character story, one arc. And that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing for me. The good in that they really do take their time to be able to fully flesh out individual stories, really build up certain characters, and give characters enough time and space to grow. On the other hand, however, because of how slow it is, and the fact you have to really focus on watching the series, it can be a tad bit boring.
No, I very much understand that sentiment, right? Okay, so first of all, it is, Will, just to answer your question about the anime, it is fall 2017, and I guess it'll be winter 2018, because it's 2 cours. Yeah, because it goes until March of 2018. Yeah, so 2 cours.
Well, there you go. So, like, the criticism I have of it being slow and at times boring, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's definitely something to take note of.
It's a deliberate thing, though. One thing I will say, though, about Ancient Magus Bride, because I'm also heavily biased, is...
Ancient Magus Bride.
Ancient Magus Bride. What did I say?
Magus. It's Magus'.
Magus', with the apostrophe.
Yeah, because you don't write the S.
Because you don't write the S after there's an S preceding it.
Confusing,
yes.
I know.
English grammar, right? And punctuations. But it's also extremely violent and very bloody. And when I say it's violent Harry Potter, and that's how I describe it, it's... I think a rather it's a reductivist kind of description, but it's a really fast description to give you an idea of what you're expecting. Because, for example, Chidori is what they call a sleigh beggy, which is in mythology a real thing of a fairy who has a lot of magical powers, and that factors in like how she is able to develop magical powers. And I think one of the things that I also really like about Ancient Magus' Bride is the difference between wizardry and sorcery. Because there are people who have magical aptitude, and then there are people that deal with the realm of magic, but has to use tools or incantations or like chants at their disposal.
Yeah, that's where they have like that very specific definition between what it is to be a mage and what it is to be a sorcerer.
Yes, and there is like different connotations for either or and different beliefs and priority systems. Also, I think the Beauty and the Beast story, while very typical, is still done pretty well, I think.
Some of the stories told, like the story about the spirit in the lake, that one was a fucking beautiful story. As long as it took.
To clean the
cleansing the lake, and that was like an amazing story. It took a very fucking long time, but it was worth it in the end. And again, with the criticisms I have about it being a very slow and at times boring kind of series, that's how it is with these kinds of shows where they want to slowly like flesh out the story. If they rushed everything and just got everything done within like 1 or 2 episodes, I think that would be even worse. Because you don't want to rush something that is as beautiful as the story of Ancient Magus' Bride. I very much appreciate that they do take their time to flesh things out. It's just, in the end, there are going to be times where you're kind of head-scratching a bit. Like, you miss something, but it's also like 3 episodes long. It's like, do I need to go back and sort of rewatch that part to understand it? It can be a little bit messy, but if you just like sit back, focus, enjoy the ride, I think it's definitely a worthy show to recommend.
So you gave it an 8?
8 out of 10.
Yeah, that's a very fair score. I gave it a 9, and I gave the manga a 10. Last thing though about Ancient Magus' Bride, the Wit Studio branding is basically a Wit Studio anime, right? Like I don't like if you had not seen a single like frame, you'll be like, oh yeah, which studio would probably do it, right?
Music is awesome. Whilst the animation quality is like, it's not like those kind of like crazy like action sequences. It's very beautifully animated.
What do you think of like the backgrounds and like the setting?
I mean, that's also the part like that sort of like kind of niche trademark that Wit Studio has. Like very good backdrops, very very good scenic backdrops. Overall, very good show. I have no problem recommending it.
All right. The next show that we will be talking about is probably a show that I have been putting off watching until now.
For almost a year and a half, actually, yeah.
Actually, even longer, because...
well, the first season premiered in summer 2019.
The manga.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about the manga beforehand, but Vinland Saga is based on the manga of the same name by Makoto Yukimura, who did the story and the art, published in English by Kodansha Comics. And season 1 premiered in summer of 2019.
And season
2, January.
About 6 months from now.
Has a manga source score of 8.99, popularity 23, ranked number 10. And the season 1 anime is 8.73, ranked 44, popularity 95. The reason why I mentioned all those numbers is because this show is of the elite class.
And it deserves to be in that. I mean, do you agree? Because I watched season 1 about a year and a half ago, and you got around to finishing season 1 just only a couple days ago.
Yes.
So it's okay. Just sort of like a little backstory. It's Vikings doing Viking shit.
Yes.
You know, raging around, pillaging, revenge stories, sort of going into sort of like conquering neighboring lands, but also defending your own lands, because that was like the wild north at the time.
Your identity, like how like people are brought up in that era as like it's just a super violent time, and
it was literally like kill or be killed.
Yeah.
And so it focuses on Thorfinn, who is the son of Thor, or Thor's. I think it's Thor's. Yeah. And he has to grow the fuck up.
Son of Helga, the mother of Helga, yeah.
He has to grow the fuck up because, people gonna take over your shit, and you have to go take over their shit. Otherwise, you will die. And if you die, the rest of your family dies because you're the strongest person in your village. If you die, nobody else survives. And that's pretty much like the premise of Vinland Saga. It's a very simple premise, but it's very, very well executed.
It's one of those shows where I would describe it as a chronicle. I think if you describe it as a chronicle, it's a very accurate term to use because it chronicles Thorfinn's journey, not only starting from his village, but basically going all over the place, learning things, killing things, almost getting killed, all the trials and tribulations of just harsh life at that time.
I mean, like, he is like the poster child of like that of the first volume of the manga where he's holding the dual daggers, and when you watch the first episode, he's nothing like that at all. I know that the manga has a different sort of like it's compiled differently in terms of how the sequence of the manga is written in and how the anime is represented, but I don't think it doesn't cut a lot of stuff out. It just changes certain things around. So the story is still very much fine.
And very bloody and very violent.
Yeah. So it starts off as a meek young little boy who then realizes the world is a really fucked up place, even though he already knew the world's a fucked up place. It's just that he had to
see it and to experience it. Yeah.
And damn, as much as it is like bloody and violent, that's not even the part that gets me. It's the fact that like when you see people who have literally lost everything and they have nothing else to lose, then that's when you see someone really go out of their way to destroy whatever's in front of them. It literally when you fight with reckless abandon and you actually have nothing to abandon, then that's the scariest.
You have nothing left
part
to lose, right? Yeah,
that is like the scariest part of watching this upbringing of this young, very very innocent, but then quickly turned violent kid. It's a wonderful story. I'm very excited to watch season 2, which hopefully will be done well by MAPPA.
I'm very excited for season 2 as well. I gave season 1 a 9 out of 10. Now, well, first of all, Will, what did you give it?
I gave it a 9.
Okay.
I think it was very close to being a 10, but I think it's just sometimes like because I know that there's more of the story to tell, and it only just told the beginning of the whole manga story, I need to reserve like that part of judgment for subsequent seasons. Because if I started off with a 10, then the only way is just to keep it consistent or down. So might as well give it a 9 first. But it is a very, 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 very strong recommend for me.
Now, Will, I need to tell you my problems with Vinland Saga. And some of them are, in my opinion, like... The fact that I gave it a 9 just tells you how much I really like Vinland Saga. The first thing is, Thorfinn is a really fucking boring character.
Ooh, that's...
Especially after the second half onwards, his involvement becomes less and less important in my mind and less interesting. The very beginning, when you sort of see his journey and develop into, I guess, his adolescence, right? Character development, literally. That was very compelling, very interesting. But after a certain point, to me, I was way more interested in what everyone else was up to and not what Thorfinn was up to.
In defense of Thorfinn, I think, in a way, you would basically what you're saying, he's very one-dimensional, right? But I think it's because of the fact that he has a very singular motivation. And that's, I'm not going to spoil it, but you know what that motivation is.
Yes.
And therefore, that's going to be the overriding continuation from the beginning of the story all the way to whenever the fuck Vinland Saga ends. So I can see why you feel that, trying to get more involved in Thorfinn's story is kind of just tiring now because he's just doing the same thing over and over and over again. But it's because of the fact that that's what his character is. Not saying that, it excuses him. I understand, of course, that, if you keep watching a character just repeating the same thing over and over because that's what their motivation is, it can get dry. I think it's just because I'm so invested in his upbringing, invested in his story, that I'm okay with it. That if he just continues to rinse and repeat and just do the same shit over and over, I think that's the point of his existence. It's a sad existence, a very sad existence. But I can see your point in terms of what else does this character have to offer.
Right. I mean, maybe season 2 will alleviate that problem that I have. The second problem that I have, it's not necessarily a problem, but it's
an observation.
There is a character who, after a certain incident happens, basically does the biggest 180 turn from a pussy to a badass in 2 seconds.
I'm trying to remember which one, because there's a lot of things that happen, and I also watched
that person has long hair.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about then. Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yep.
So this person progresses, and then has a certain incident happen, and then this person's outlook, attitude, priorities completely changes and does a 180. First of all, I'd like to say, when this person changes, the changes are fucking awesome. The character is badass as fuck. But all of a sudden, it went from 0 to 100 to me very quickly, and let's say the adjustment period.
Is it this character?
Yes, it is that character. I think that character is really good, but that it's he just snapped.
That change kind of caught you off guard.
That change caught me off. No, I knew it was going to happen, but it was such a drastic change. It was like two completely different people, and I thought it was really hard to be convinced in the for that period of time that how did you go from here to here? But then at that point, I was just like, you just keep doing badass stuff. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it.
Well, speaking of badass stuff, that first sequence in the first episode.
Bro, my dude.
Holy fuck, right?
Gorgeous.
Admittedly, some of the fight sequences that happen afterwards are...
some of the 3D was... Okay, granted, you want to spend money where it counts. So when it's just people marching or just really random stupid shit, you having 3D... is fine, honestly. I understand. But when everything else looks super good looking, the 3D looks extra obvious to me.
Yeah. You definitely, once you have everything as the shining gold standard, you notice the kinks. You notice the parts where it's just hey, I know where you slacked off.
80% of Vinland Saga spoiled my expectations of that 5%, and then the other 10% is just oh yeah, I should rewind and watch that again because that was dope. But look, it's a really good show. I'm excited for season 2, and
yeah, I'm glad you finally got around to actually finishing it now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the living crap out of it. Special shout out to I think episode 14 that involves a certain girl hiding something in a tree.
Yes.
And that episode was... I was on the MTR, on the subway. I paused and had to, like, look out the window and just listen to music. Lo-fi music for the rest of the train ride. Because, oh boy.
Food is important in Vinland Saga. If you remember that one specific episode where food is scarce and food is provided, but then it comes at a very, very serious cost. Yeah. It's not a happy show, but it's a damn good show.
And it's very real.
Oh yeah, no, it does not hold anything back. I mean, like we've seen enough really like dark and dystopian shows. This is one of those where it's like it's dark, dystopian, and it's real as fuck. Like you would not expect this to be any different from like a live adaptation or even one of those History Channel retellings of the lives of Vikings.
All right, we are going to end our entire Wit Studio catalog on probably the highest ranked, the gold medalist, the king of all of Wit Studios' catalog, Ranking of Kings.
What a great introduction to that.
It is based on the manga of the same name by Suzuki Toka, who did the story and the art. There's 2 curves of it for fall 2021 and winter 2022, with a MAL rating of 8.60, ranked 76, popularity 414. I did not list the MAL score for the manga, but it's an 8.00. But I think we remember reading it. There was like the translation in English had like an issue, so then they had to recall it or something. But
that, and also like when the series was about to debut, the anime was the debut. I looked up the manga score for it. There was no.
It's
manga
not
score.
available, right?
And it was because this is another one of those Wit trademarks. It's a very obscure show.
Where the fuck did this come from, right? Do you remember we saw the poster for it, and then you and I were just like, "What is this?
What the hell is Wit doing?" And then we should have actually realized with hindsight, this is exactly what Wit would do.
Exactly, right?
So, Ranking of Kings follows a sort of like coming of age story,
or you could say one of the GAP finale winners for Best Boy / Husbando, Boji.
Boji is the fucking king. I mean, of course, the series is called Ranking of Kings. So it is, we don't really need to go that much into the story because we talked the shit about it, but we are actually going to do more of a mention of Ranking of Kings because whilst Jason has been putting it off for a little bit of while, not like he deliberately put it off, it's just the fact that there's a lot of other shit he needed to watch. Therefore, unfortunately, Ranking of Kings was a casualty in that, but because now we're doing a Wit analysis, now's a good time for him to share his 2 cents about Ranking of Kings.
I watched 14 episodes of the 23, and I even watched it minutes before I shown up to record. That's how much I actually wanted to finish it.
Very, very fresh in your mind, right? In terms of what's happened.
Extremely fresh. First thing that anyone would notice just by looking at Ranking of Kings is the aesthetics. And it is something that will initially... will definitely throw you off. I'll just say that.
It's definitely very lush and pastel kind of.
And Disney-like in a way, like Disney, like Western cartoony kind of vibe. But at the same time, when it juxtaposes it with violence and blood, and they do not hide away from...
It's gory. It's pretty gory. Not like extreme, like cover your eyes gore, but like you would not expect that level of violence in a show that looks like Ranking of Kings.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to say special shout out to Ranking of Kings getting the Japanese Federation of the Deaf, right?
Yeah.
To get use of sign language, because Boji is someone who is mute and
communicates using Japanese sign language.
Deaf and mute, I think, right, as the 2 disabilities that he has. Mm-hmm. And I really like the show, but the past, like, I would say of 14 episodes, the last, like, 5 episodes, I love the show.
But still don't really know what's happening, right?
I don't think I know what the fuck's going on. I know more than I did in the beginning.
But more of nothing is like, this doesn't help me at all.
Technically, the name of the anime Ranking of Kings only shows up literally once or twice, and then never again, yet. At least where I'm at. But But the thing that I really like about it is also people dealing with trauma and people dealing with disadvantages and disabilities. With, for example, Boji being deaf and mute, but others also just being like, you're short, you're fat, or like
you're missing limbs, or you just are like you don't have enough power to be able to ascend ranks, and therefore you're always an underling.
Right. Or you are not willing to fight head on. So are you like a warrior, or are you like
a wolf,
coward?
Are you a wolf or a sheep?
Right. And I think the best lesson that I learned from Ranking of Kings takes place where Boji's brother goes into town to sort of like chill out, I think, with like his guards, and his teacher who's with him, his trainer, I guess is the technical term, notices a blind guy, and he says like, what do you think of that blind guy? And the prince was like, oh, if I was blind, I would just kill myself, because I don't want to live like that. That kind of disability, I don't want to live that every second of my living life.
Yeah, having such a big disadvantage is, in essence, to his mind, a weakness.
Right.
And you should never show weakness, especially him being the prince of the kingdom, right?
But then the teacher flips it up on him, and he's like, but because he's deaf, he has to figure... because he's blind, he has to figure out how to communicate with other people. And through his quote-unquote disability or disadvantage, he has learned humility, empathy, and not only that, but in a way he is willing to not give up. He's willing to work for it extra hard because he does not have the normal advantage. Like, let's not talk about actual advantage, just being normal, quote-unquote. And that is the best summation of what I've learned from Ranking of Kings. And also just having your expectations of certain characters, you think like, oh, this person's just a bad person. And actually there's no bad person. There's just the way things are. I mean, there are like people that are more evil than others, but sometimes you just want to be a good mom.
Yeah. Speaking of characters, right? Queen Hilling. What a MILF.
Fuck. That's not what I was going to...
Best mom. Best mom.
I was ready, like, in the first, like, episode 2 or 3 to be like, oh, she's, like, this archetype. Oh, it's going to be like, oh, fine, whatever. And I was pleasantly surprised by how things turned out already at episode 14. And it's just... I teared up at one point.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So you got into the second cur, which means that they are now doing the second opening.
Very good opening. Very good ending as well.
So good.
Actually, you know what? I would say of the 2 openings and the 2 endings, ED1 is the weakest.
Yeah.
I would say OP2, OP1, ED2, ED1.
Well, I really liked ED2.
I like ED2 as lot, but like
OP1 is just like
it's just really happy,
yeah.
right? And especially when you mention
it's much in the same way where it's like when you're watching the opening for Hozuki, you kind of just want to just get up and march, right? It's the same way when you're watching OP1
props
ranking.
Vinland Saga has like the most like adrenaline pumping OPs ever. So Wit Studio has a really good track record of just really good openings and endings in general.
Well, actually, yeah, After the Rain has really good music too.
Yeah. It was like very bubbly and very nice. Spike's
Seraph
family
of the End does not have good music though. Oh, I mean, I'm just bitter about it.
What about Kabaneri is really good.
Oh, Kabaneri's fucking good too.
About Attack on Titan and Link Horizon is really good.
I will say though that what's the opening that was done in part 2, the final for Attack on Titan, the one that hit the US Billboard.
Oh, Sim, the rumbling.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's a fucking fire track.
Or you could be like Vampire in the Garden, in which there is no OP and no ED.
So it's just straight 30 minutes?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
There's like no opening credits. There is ending credits, but like...
It's just credits that's laid over like the ending sequence of whatever episode, right?
Yeah, it's weird in that. But hey, look. The studio can be weird. Okay.
So, finally got around to Vinland Saga and Ranking of Kings. Worth it?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. I knew it was going to be worth it.
It's just time, right? And also other stuff you need to prioritize. So I'm glad that you managed to get around to at least not just finishing Vinland Saga, but also watching a lot of Ranking of Kings.
I'm definitely going to finish Ranking of Kings. Like, there's just no shadow of a doubt in my mind.
And I assure you that the score it has right now on my anime list of an 8.60 very much deserved.
So here's the issue. Do you think there'll ever be a season 2?
It's hard. I mean, I don't know what the direction that the manga is going because I have not even gone... Because there was no English license for it, right?
So, well, it got recalled, but yeah.
So I don't know. Like... If it does get a second season, cool. But I think it's also like if it just ended the way it is now, I would still be like incredibly happy with what I've watched. So yeah, let's just wrap this thing quickly in terms of let's say because we talked about like
a lot of shows,
9-10 series in depth, right? If you were to say like 3 like solid recommends, right? One of them being Ancient Magus' Bride, because I know.
Yeah.
What would be your other 2?
I would say Vinland Saga, and I would say Hozuki's Coolheadedness.
Ooh, good pick.
Because all 3 of them offer different facets of what makes Wit Studio, and what makes me really love Wit Studio.
Yeah, I think like it's always going to be easy to recommend Vivy. It's always going to be easy to recommend Kabaneri.
Oh, hey, watch Spy X Family. That's my recommend. That's just useless.
I would throw in After the Rain. I think it's.
I think I was really surprised at like, at least before recording, like throughout the week or whatever, you were kind of implying to me that like you were really digging After the Rain, and I was surprised
because it's very real. It's like one of those things where like you always expect a fairy tale ending for stuff, and not to say that this does or does not have it. I don't want to spoil anything, but you just watch it and you're like, yeah, no, this is how shit happens. This is how shit goes, and like you just got to be ready to accept it because no matter what you do to it, the ending's not going to change. The story dynamics not going to change. The characters are always going to be the same. So you just roll with it and just hopefully it's your thing. It was my thing. I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was my thing as well. So that is the end of our Wit Studio analysis and the end of episode 41 of the Good Anime Palette podcast. You can always reach us through our email, gapalette@gmail.com. That's GAPALETTE@gmail.com. All lowercase, all one word. On Twitter, using the handle @PaletteGood. That's capital P and capital G, all one word. Or through our GAP Discord server using the invite link that is provided in the show description. We also have a website, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. You should go and check it out. Music credits for this episode. Our intro music is Ninth Power by Henyo. Our break music is Salamanca by Sarah the Instrumentalist. And our outro music is Golden Rules by Luax. You can support the music artists we feature by listening to them on Spotify, Apple Music, or other various music listening platforms. And our royalty-free music was provided courtesy of Epidemic Sound. If you're interested in using Epidemic Sound, you can sign up using our referral link in the show description to get 10% off on your first 12 months and the first 30 days of your subscription for free. Terms and conditions apply.
So you know how like in the first half we talked about like what the future outlook for Wit Studio is, right? Do you think that there's ever a chance that Wit Studio would do a sports anime? Because they could go for some rather obscure ones, right? Like Gaelic football,
Quidditch.
Ooh.
Well, obviously it's copyrighted, right?
But like some sort of like fictional mythical sport, right?
It has to be
maybe jousting, tap dancing.
Actually, jousting, like traditional jousting, I think that might be. I can see that.
Yeah, you could even see them doing something like synchronized swimming.
So okay, let's end this episode on if you are in the boardroom, the Wit Studio boardroom, and they're like, whatever you say, we will do. We trust you.
I would probably push for a synchronized swimming one because it would at least also involve like that sort of like fluid animation aspect that they have, but also incorporate the use of music too. So it's not as straightforward as like a ballet or like dance or we can say tap dancing too. They could do that. They can do that one as well. But I think like synchronized swimming because it would be a kind of like their kind of style where it's one of the more obscure ones. You don't really see a lot of shows about or any shows really about synchronized swimming, but it does include good music, good choreography, and I feel that Wit does both things really, really well.
You're ready for my answer?
Go for it.
So you have several routes, but they all stem from the same genre. Either a noir or a mystery, a murder mystery at that. Something like Clue, like the board game Clue.
Oh.
That would be like, I can see how, like, for example, you're in this mansion and it looks ancient, but it has all this like furniture that looks exotic and exquisite. Then you have like the brutality of the murder mystery and everything, and dialogue, and just the heavy tone and seriousness and the artsy style. I just thought like that is what I would want Wit Studio to make.
I could see that. I mean, look, I think if there's ever like a new series that comes out that is produced by Wit Studio, like much in the way that we were very much like pleasantly shocked at how good Ranking of Kings is, I would be ready to take on whatever else Wit Studio comes out with.
We reported earlier about Law Studios being in the red, and a lot of studios have to either reconsolidate or so on and so forth. But for me, there are certain studios, I would say MAPPA is not even in that category. I would say like Studio Trigger, Kyoto Animation, and WIT, where like their name automatically implies the type of, I guess, atmosphere or vibe that it goes for, because MAPPA does everything in many ways. So it's kind of hard to sort of fix what MAPPA, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means like their identity is more malleable.
And look, within like the short 10-year history that WIT has, it's made a huge impact within the anime industry. So I am very happy to continue watching anything that's done by WIT Studio. I'm very much looking forward to the new ONAs that they come up with. And it's only a matter of time before there's an announcement of whatever else that WIT Studio is doing that's not Spy X related. So
like Brothers Grimm, I'm excited. I think that's a perfect choice for them. So
yeah. But I mean, if you guys, want to tweet us or want to, drop us a message, what do you guys want to see from Wit Studio? Do you want to see them do sports? Do you want to do some more sort of like film noir, crime, mystery kind of shows?
Yeah. Or hey, if you want us to do a studio analysis for another animation studio, just give us a shout, and we will see what we can do.
Just don't make it Sunrise, because I don't want to watch so much goddamn Gundam.
Don't make it Studio Dean, please.
Well, I mean, we can just watch Higurashi.
Or
then, right?
Pierrot
wouldn't be bad. Well, wouldn't be good either.
JC Staff would be okay because you have a lot to choose from.
There's some good JC Staff stuff.
Yeah, you do. Okay.
Yep.
So I think that's it. Will, any last things?
Please. If you haven't watched it yet, please watch Vivy. Please watch Kabaneri. And absolutely, please watch Ranking of Kings.
No, you should watch Bubble, man.
Okay, just to sign up. Bubble isn't bad, but holy hell. The expectations that we had going into the movie and then a disappointment coming out when we logged off Netflix this was sad. Like, I didn't feel emotionally connected to the movie when the music stopped. But when the music came back on, holy fuck, I was ready to just be like, yeah, dude, let's just watch some more of this Bubble animation shit. It's not bad, it's not good. But if you just want to enjoy the music, especially if you have like a movie theater-esque sound system, fucking do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.